Today I wanted to talk about a topic I feel like I've touched on here and there when it was relevant, especially in unpopular opinions videos and whatnot. It's an interesting one to me because there is no answer, but it's definitely something that most people have an opinion on. And that's the concept of the one man, one woman, one person show, so to speak. And in the context of this video and examples I'm going to talk about, I'm going to touch on two artists for whom that's become a really big part of their brand and how it's kind of emblematic of the way that a lot of people consume and talk about art and media today. So let's get into it. Obviously, this video is mainly inspired by the varied reactions to Taylor Swift's new album, The Life of a Showgirl. Most of the criticisms, it seems, were critical of the lyricism, be it the weight or point of lyrics in songs like Actually Romantic, the Charlie XCX clapback song, Father Figure, or something like Cancelled, which people were memeing to death. In his 2-star Guardian review of the album, Alexis Petridis called The Life of a Showgirl dull razzle-dazzle, claiming, "The rest floats in one ear and out the other. Not unpleasantly, but you might reasonably expect more given the amassed songwriting firepower behind it and Swift's claims of keeping the bar really high." Something else the review mentions, which is a criticism I saw very often online, is that The Life of a Showgirl covers a lot of already trodden ground, probably with the exception of the songs that reference Travis. Alexis also makes a good point that several of the lyrics seem to have this sort of confusion or inconsistency between Taylor claiming to want the simple life, but also making references to being the billionaire A-lister that she actually is and obviously living like it. He goes on to say, "The high school kids who heard their daily lives reflected in Love Story or 15 are now well into their 30s and may also be reflecting on the possibility of 2 kids and a driveway with a basketball hoop. But despite her estimated personal fortune of $1.6 billion, she declares herself uninterested in success materialism. That yacht life under chopper blades, those bright lights and Balenci shades," which rings a bit hollow when minutes previously she was likening the distinctly 5-star circumstances of her fiancé's courtship to the love life of Elizabeth Taylor, dropping in references to the Plaza Athénée, a Paris hotel where the cheapest room will set you back £2,000 a night. And I'm sure this is probably a mix of Taylor wanting to write relatable lyrics, but also providing some of that glitz and glam a lot of pop listeners enjoy fantasizing about, like that life could be there someday or as some form of escapism. There is this very much have it both ways tone, like Taylor knows that she has to write about her life because that's what people expect, that's what they're coming for, and have become obsessed with even, but it's also like, if I'm writing about something too unattainable, if it sounds too out of reach, especially now that a lot of people are over the excess and it being waved in our faces, they might check out. So it's tricky territory to fall in. Because I don't think people who really genuinely love and resonate with Taylor Swift's music feel that way about it because they think she positions herself above them, but because of the, oh, she's just like us, she's experiencing things like us of it all. You know, the English teacher, not the CEO. Pitchfork rated Showgirl the lowest of any of Taylor's albums so far, giving it a 5.9 out of 10. The byline of the review claims, at least to the author, that Taylor's stardom has become bigger and more compelling than the music itself. They're complimentary of the album's title track, saying it did realize the theme of the album and also celebrated the presence and the vibe of the camaraderie in the song thanks to the feature from Sabrina Carpenter. And then they go on to say, "The rest of the time, Showgirl sounds like much of the pop music you have heard over the past 10 years and throughout your lifetime. It asks that this time you listen more closely because this is Taylor Swift with the enormity of commercial power and cultural significance and algorithmic rank that implies." And in response to the album's criticism, Taylor responded in her interview with Zane Lowe,
"I welcome the chaos. The rule of show business is if it's the first week of my album release and you are saying either my name or my album title, you're helping." And art, I have a lot of respect for people's subjective opinions on art. I'm not the art police. It's like everybody is allowed to feel exactly how they want. And what our goal is as entertainers is to be a mirror.
which, like, it's hard to disagree with anything she's saying. Even the idea that criticizing the album gets its name out there more. That's the point of art. For the artist to express something, then we say how we feel, how we relate, what we like, dislike, and so on. Tale as old as time. But I feel like that's what makes a topic like this so tricky, but also so interesting. All of this kind of reminded me of the conversation a few years ago in early 2020 surrounding Tyler Perry and his claims that he writes his several movies and shows all on his own. And a lot of the people, myself included, honestly were like, yes, and it is starting to show. Or, yes, but you're a billionaire who owns a production company. What is the point of doing all of that when you have staff? And this all started when he posted an Instagram video, I think on set of The Haves and the Have-Nots, which is one of his shows, And he said in the post, "I don't know if you know this, but all shows on television have a writer's room, and most of the time there are 10 people, 12, whatever, that write on these television shows. I have no writer's room. Nobody writes any of my work. I write it all." And yes, that is a lot of work. But for years now, several fans or former fans have grown increasingly critical of or even jaded with Tyler Perry's work. Lately, he's been criticized for nearly always pushing one type of story: a trodden down black woman suffering through struggle of at the hands of a cartoonishly evil and usually dark-skinned black man. And over the years, the plots have gotten wilder and wilder. And like I've mentioned before, I was kind of still fascination watching by the time that Acrimony came out, because I was like, Lord, we have jumped the shark. But I tapped out by the time Divorce in the Black came out. I made it 5 minutes into that movie.
Bring your mama down! Come on, get her! Oh my God!
And over the last, I'd say like 8 years or so, several of the productions, like A Fall from Grace, they have been criticized for being low budget, the wigs and the costuming especially, and the plots feeling a little rushed overall. And that's on top of it just being another struggle love story where Grace gets dunked on and humbled the entire movie, you know, because it's a Tyler Perry production. And honestly, this continuously showing up in his work does make a lot of sense when you know that he, a billionaire, told successful black women they should be okay with dating men who can only pay the light bill. And I think this is interesting because it seems like in a lot of Tyler's earlier movies and play adaptations, it was often a black woman getting mistreated by her wealthy husband and then her falling in love with a light bill only sort of guy. Either that or the story following multiple women and then showing one woman getting her life ruined by a wealthy man, while another gets with one of less means who actually treats her well. And so as you can imagine, the more of these movies and shows that have been released over the years, the more we talk about these things, the more Tyler's been criticized for perpetuating negative stereotypes in media, basically under the guise of them being black stories. And technically they are, obviously embellishments here and there for shock value because it's entertainment, but at the heart of a lot of Tyler's earlier work, I would say there were terrible family dynamics that quite a lot of his audience could definitely relate to. And then on top of that, a lot of the criticism was like, yes, even if you are pulling from a real place, pulling from actual negative experiences, why is it that every single story you tell has to be some sort of struggle love and some black woman at her wit's end? Like, is this all you know how to do? And so thinking of Tyler or even Taylor Swift, this topic interests me because if the answer is yes, that's all I know how to do, or no, I can do more, but yes, this is all I want to do, why is that a bad thing? Or is it a bad thing? And bad is such a vague word, but I mean it as in critics, both publications and audiences alike, are like, yeah, okay, well, it's time, maybe some outside perspectives, maybe even taking a break, stepping away from the pen for a while. Your work might benefit. You might get some new ideas, some new inspiration. But it's like, as silly as it sounds, an artist is not required to do that. And it seems like in this present moment, especially for them, that doesn't seem like the goal or the plan. And I also think this is where the art and business of it all combine too, because yes, Taylor Swift is a person, a singer-songwriter, but she's also a brand. Same with Tyler Perry and Tyler Perry Productions. And it's also very clear that because a lot of their early work in their respective genres was written by them is so them, and they never really shifted out of that, they're not as chameleonic in their respective genres as other artists might be. I feel like the work of a Taylor or Tyler is different in that you're coming for the next installment of the Taylor universe, the next iteration of a familiar story, rather than something entirely new, even if it is an album, a show, or movie that can quote-unquote stand on its own. But that's exactly how both of them built their fan bases, so like, you give the people what they want. And because of that, they've been able to secure very loyal, very dedicated fan bases who they show up for their work in all senses of the form and will actually buy it, go to see it. And I'm sure the fact that there is this understanding that you know what you're getting into, it might be a little bit different from last time, but it's not going to be anything you've never seen, should have never expected before. I think that does make people more inclined to spend their money. And sometimes, as I think a lot of us have seen and understand now, fans don't always want different as much as they say that they do. And then to speak to this in 2024, so asked again years later about his lack of a writer's room, Tyler said that having a writer's room had actually been a nightmare and went on to say,
they were turning in scripts that weren't up to par for my audience. Mm-hmm. I've been working with this audience and cultivating for 25 years. Yeah. So I know what they want. So I would have to pay them to write the scripts. When they turn into bad scripts, I got to pay them to rewrite the scripts. Right. And then I would go and rewrite the scripts, and then they go to WGA and they grieve me and say he rewrote the script and pay me again.
So then you can kind of paint yourself into a corner where you continuously have to write all of your own stuff because you know that that's what your fans expect, or you have to train all of your writers to write like you, which a lot of creatives don't necessarily want to do unless they don't have any other choice. And then going back to that Zane Lowe interview, Taylor said, "We're doing this thing for keeps. Like, I have such an eye on my legacy when I'm making music." Which, of course, is not news if you know a single thing about Taylor Swift and her attitude towards her own music, and now she's on top at the forefront of all of it. And I was going back and looking through her songwriting credits. She's credited on all of her songs, and 9 times out of 10, the only other person credited is whoever produced the song, meaning they likely worked with Taylor on the song's melody, the composition, probably more so than any lyrical contributions, but who knows. I had to go all the way back to Fearless to find some songwriters credited, ones who didn't produce the songs at all, and they were the same ones that worked on Taylor's debut album, but again, she's still also credited in all of those songs. And because she's been the primary writer behind her work for the length of her career, she probably knows from a lyrical standpoint better than most what speaks to her audience. And for the most part, I feel like all of this boils down to a difference in creative process. They do yield different results. But that, of course, doesn't stop fans from using the amount of credits a project has as a sort of value judgment on that artist's work and what accolades or status they do or don't deserve. Album credits will be pulled out as a gotcha moment, as if it's not an artist just citing their sources. In my opinion, you're not less creative for having direct inspirations or using one piece of art as a point of reference for your own, because at times that can be more difficult than creating a more insular project. And I think probably still one of the most public displays of this debate was the 2015 Grammys, where Beck took home Album of the Year for Morning Phase. Several thought Beyonce had it in the bag with Self-Titled and were so mad when she lost to the point that Who Is Beck started trending on Twitter. And then it turned into a debate over whether Beyonce even deserved to win in the first place. And then it turned into a debate over whether that win would have been deserved had Beyonce won, because her album was full of credits to other artists, whereas Beck wrote each song himself and produced the album, and pretty much all of the credits on Morning Phase just go to other instrumentalists and engineers. But then looking at an album like Beyonce, which takes a lot of influence from hip-hop, where the sampling is commonplace, or the fact that Beyonce has a lot of artists featured on several of the songs, so they're obviously going to get a credit, it makes logical sense that there are more credits given out to artists on this album. And really, from what I read from people who were familiar with the Grammy voting, they think Beck ended up taking it because his vote wasn't split for the rock genre, whereas the other nominees were Pharrell's Girl, Ed Sheeran's Multiply, and Sam Smith's In the Lonely Hour. So if you wanted to vote for a pop or R&B album, you had other options. And that aside, because it's probably the biggest factor, what I'm saying is I just think it's interesting it's become a popular argument that X artist is less talented than Y artist because X artist brought in more people to work on the project rather than doing it primarily alone. And it's also not the case that just because Beyonce happens to collaborate with more people for that album, that she's got less creative control than a Taylor Swift, than a Beck. It's not the case that people are telling her who to collaborate with, who she has to sample. It just seems that it's the case they've got a different creative process when it comes to their collaborations and at what point they're going to choose to collaborate and what that looks like. And I've said before and will say again that a lot of artists from Beyonce's time, and even before her time more so, artists, their artistic merit did not depend on their ability to write music. You had the Mariah Careys, for example, who did write and produce, but you'd also have artists like Whitney Houston who famously didn't write much of her music. And I think for that reason, when comparing artists, it needs to be clear, are we comparing vocals, stage presence, pens, production, composition? Because every artist is a slightly different combination of those elements, and the things that they contribute across those elements is probably going to be different for each of them. So some of them, it doesn't make much sense to compare. And then, of course, just because a song or project has fewer credits, it doesn't mean that it was made in a vacuum, devoid of outside inspiration or references, because that's nearly impossible. That was actually another pretty common criticism of The Life of a Showgirl, that several of the songs sounded like others, and clearly so. Rolling Stone actually published an article about it, noting a lot of fans thought the title track sounded like Jonas Brothers' Cool, Wood sounds like the Jackson 5's I Want You Back, saw other people say ABC, and actually Romantic is reminiscent of the Pixies' Where Is My Mind. The article includes an analysis by forensic musicologist Joe Bennett, who did find some slight similarities because you can only make so many different chord progressions, but he did say that none of the similarities, at least in his opinion, were enough to call them plagiarism. I do see the cool comparison, but to me, Wood sounds more like another song that I can't name. It's been at the tip of my tongue for 2 weeks now, and it's upsetting to me. And then outside of this album, I also remember at least twice people have said that songs of Taylor's have sounded very Lana Del Rey inspired. Wildest Dreams was one. I can't remember what song they thought it sounded like. And then I remember people saying the beginning of Who's Afraid of Little Old Me was very reminiscent of Blue Jeans. And then outside of Lana Del Rey, there were the Cruel Summer and Luna's stylish similarities. And taking it back to the Life of a Showgirl, Pitchfork made a similar point, noting, "But it is simply untrue to claim, as Rolling Stone did on Friday, that Showgirl represents new exciting sonic turns. Granted, there's never been another Taylor Swift song that sounds so much like the Jackson 5's I Want You Back, or so uncannily like both Pixies' Where Is My Mind and Weezer's Say It Ain't So. But then, on the other hand, a song or album having lots of credits doesn't mean everyone's always fairly credited either, outside of a genuine oversight here or there. As long as her credits often are, even Beyonce's had several cases where artists big and small said their contributions weren't acknowledged, or Beyonce, her team, took a song and did not credit the artist. One example I've talked about before is Drunk in Love, where Future said that he created the song's melody, originally with the producer Detail, and then sent the record to Beyonce. And he said that he followed up and asked what was going on with the song, but it never came out, so he just used the melody and part of the chorus again on different songs of his, called Good Morning and I've Been Drinking. And then eventually Drunk in Love obviously did come out, and Detail was credited for producing the song, but Future didn't receive any credits on it.
I recorded the song first for her.
For Beyonce.
For Beyonce. And then Detail came and worked with her. He said she didn't listen to it. He said she didn't. I don't know what happened, whatever, with it. And then she didn't put it out for like 6 months. And we never know. I was like, what's she doing with the record? He was like, man, let's just make another one. We made Good Morning. Drunk in Love just came out of nowhere. And
Did you get credit for that?
I did Drunk in Love.
And there are quite a few other examples, but one that I had never heard of before was artist Jennifer Armour actually filing a lawsuit against Beyonce and her team, claiming they stole some of her lyrics for Baby Boy from Jennifer's song, Got a Little Bit of Love for You. An excerpt from a 2007 article published in the Athenaeum reads, Armour's attorney, Dana Kirk, told the judges that an expert analyzed Armour's slow melodic version along Knowles' hip-hop song, and that the two are substantially similar. But Cynthia Arado, representing Knowles, said the standard for copyright cases is what an ordinary person hears, not an expert's analysis. In the end, the case was dismissed and a judge ruled the song substantially dissimilar, which happened again when Jennifer's team attempted to appeal. Searched, but I couldn't find Jennifer's song online anywhere to form my own opinion, but I was curious. And in talking about this topic, I don't really want it to come off as me saying, oh, well, Taylor Swift and Tyler Perry primarily make work to profit off their diehard fans and not for the general public, whereas someone like Beyonce is just making music solely for the love of the game and does not care if she makes another dollar. Because I don't believe that, and I believe the truth is probably somewhere in the middle for all of them, regardless of how they make their work. Something else I'm wondering from a very Western, very American perspective is how much individualism has to do with this and how much it spills over into how we think about art. In our own lives, we're told that we're more successful or better people for living alone or being completely self-sufficient from the second that you turn 18. It's then seen as a moral failing to rely on other people either because you have to or simply because you choose to, because having that community and division of labor is beneficial. Someone who writes a song with someone else or wants to do a puzzle with a friend, that isn't an automatic admission that they can't do that thing alone. Maybe they want to make it social, or maybe they simply want to rely on another person's creative strengths to add to what they're doing. But if wanting that collaboration, assistance, dividing that labor isn't seen as normal, when we do see it, we're more likely to think, oh, that person wanted help because they must need it. Why else would they want to do something with someone else? And then, of course, I'm sure this is also tied to a lot of fans wanting to see artists that they like as this all-talented genius because they feel that that reflects positively on them too. And if they've been conditioned to think done on one's own equals better, they're going to be more likely to undercut or dismiss the contributions of other artists that their faves work with. They might also use the fact that other artists collaborate more than their fave, or the fact that their fave's opposition doesn't write, produce, what have you, as automatic proof that that artist's work is of lower quality or is less valuable. As always, thank you so very much for watching. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe so that you can stick around for more. Also, if you'd like to become a channel member and get early access to videos, the link is in the description. And again, thank you so very much for watching. I love you all so very much, and we'll see you so very soon. Bye-bye.